Colombian President Iván Duque expressed support for the opposition, saying he rejects the, quote, dictatorship of Maduro. We call on the military and the people of Venezuela to be on the right side of history, he added. Colombia called for an emergency meeting of the Lima Group, a bloc of 14 nations dedicated to settling the Venezuelan crisis peacefully. Reporters asked Colombia's foreign minister if members of the Lima Group planned the coup, an accusation made by Maduro government.
Colombia is at the forefront of what has been happening in Venezuela from a political and diplomatic point of view to create conditions to permit our neighbor Venezuela to live in democracy and freedom again.
But Latin American nations remain sharply divided. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel tweeted, "We strongly reject this coup." He accused armed groups of, quote, creating terror on the streets of Venezuela. Bolivian President Evo Morales also condemned the uprising, saying it is serving foreign interests. The president of Peru expressed support for opposition leader Juan Guaido, but insisted any change should be brought about by the Venezuelan people without foreign interventions.
We have always said it should be the Venezuelan people's decision. We have never been in agreement with a foreign military intervention. For that, we need the people, and we are currently seeing the armed forces manifest themselves to take the road back to democracy.
Mexico expressed concern over any escalation of violence and bloodshed. Mexico is among the nations that have not recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido.
We hope for dialogue, that human rights will be respected, and that there will be no violence in all countries of the world. But we do not intervene, because the respect for rights of others is peace.
With the world's largest oil reserves, Venezuela is also flashpoint in great power politics. The U.S. Secretary of State tweeted support for, quote, the Venezuelan people and their quest for freedom and democracy. A Russian Foreign Ministry statement condemned what it called the radical opposition, saying it, quote, once again resorted to violent methods of confrontation. Michelle Begue, CGTN, Bogota.
For more on this story and what it could mean for Venezuela, we turn to investigative journalist Ben Swan. Thanks for joining me, Ben.
Yeah, Scotty, thanks for having me on. Okay,
I have to be honest with you, this is very troubling because Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, is proposing using mercenaries to overthrow the Venezuelan government. How would that work? And who is Prince pitching this idea to? And does the White House actually seem open to it?
Yeah, so Eric Prince, as you said, the founder of Blackwater, it's very controversial because of the involvement they had in the Iraq War. And then at one point, they kind of brought down Blackwater, rebranded it, gave it a new name. But the idea is he's pitching 5,000 mercenaries to go into Venezuela to support Juan Guaido and to overthrow the Maduro regime. And what he's been doing, apparently, according to Reuters, is taking high-level meetings in Washington, pitching this idea, and also meeting with some very wealthy expats from Venezuela, and he is trying to get essentially financial support for this idea. He's also been trying to pitch it to the Trump administration. Now, so far, from what we understand, the Trump administration is not commenting one way or the other on it, but sources that Reuters spoke to, and you know those anonymous sources, who knows whether you can believe it or not, are saying that the Trump administration would probably not go for something like this. But this is the idea that's being pitched by Eric Prince, again, the founder of Blackwater, that 5,000 mercenaries be sent into Venezuela to support Guaido and to overthrow the Maduro regime.
Okay, Ben, but do you actually see the White House coming out and openly saying, yes, we are going to pay for, with taxpayer dollars, mercenaries to go into another country? That sounds extremely dangerous and like you're opening up a door that America doesn't want to open. What are some of the dangers of doing something like this in the future?
Well, I think the biggest danger of it, and according to some of the folks who have been talked to would agree with this, that you would start a civil war, essentially, if you do that. Because, you know, this is very different than direct military intervention, which in and of itself creates, Scotty, a whole host of problems. I mean, there's a whole series of dangers of actually sending in U.S. military. But that aside, it's even more precarious to send in mercenaries to try to overthrow the government there, especially when 5,000 of them is not a small number. And so you would immediately know that this was going on. The fear is that you would have factions that would quickly form and a civil war would break out inside of Venezuela. Obviously, the Trump administration, what they're trying to do right now is apply economic pressure, sanctions pressure, and hope at some point we're thinking maybe even military pressure, but it would have to be organized. Sending in mercenaries would raise so many different flags, not just for people in Venezuela, but also across South America and really around the world if the U.S. were to take this step. I don't see how they could do it.
Yeah, well, and that's the question is, look around the world, all the other ideas. So it's almost like when it looks like it's not going their way in other countries, those leaderships or people in those countries might expect the U.S. to do the same thing and hire more mercenaries. What is the difference, just for our audience, in bringing in mercenaries versus actually deploying our troops of the United States into a situation like this?
Well, the biggest difference, so that the audience understands, is that according to the U.S. Constitution, in order for the U.S. military to go into a country like Venezuela, first of all, if we're going to actually follow the Constitution, the U.S. Congress would have to approve it. So it would have to be approved by representatives of the people. They would approve the military action. The president would carry it out. Now, we haven't been following that model really since World War II. But even without that model, the president still has to declare that he's sending U.S. soldiers in. Taxpayers are paying for this. And so there's accountability through Congress. The difference with mercenaries is these are now trained soldiers who are no longer in the military, who essentially work for private contractors. There's no accountability for what they do. There's no accountability to the U.S. taxpayer. There's no accountability to Congress. They simply go into these places, and in many cases, they'll have immunity for the things that they do, protected by the U.S. government, but not accountable to the U.S. government. So it is an incredibly messy, gray area in terms of how this operates. And as we know from the Iraq War, the use of mercenaries in that case, the use of these private contractors, that's what a much better term, right? Private contractors, it has not worked well in Afghanistan or in Iraq in terms of some of the fallout that's come from civilians being killed.
Well, Ben, I know you're going to stick with this story, and if the president decides to go down this route, I don't know necessarily if we'll ever find out or we'll hear about it beforehand, but I know you'll be the one to be able to continue to stay on top of it and let us know. Thank you, Ben.
You know I will.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.
We are beginning in Venezuela, where the power struggle between opposing forces is turning into violence in the streets. Now, there has been clashes between the government and supporters of opposition leader Juan Guaido after he called for a military uprising to try and force Nicolas Maduro out of power. And part of that tension is also going to be playing out right here in Washington, D.C. on American soil. RT's Rachel Blevins is following the story for us. Rachel, you were out at the embassy all last week. What is going on currently?
Well, we are following the current situation in Venezuela right now, where clashes broke out between police and protesters near an Air Force base in Caracas. During a press conference, National Security Advisor John Bolton called the unrest in Venezuela a very serious situation, and he said that the country needs to be ruled by the people, not by external forces. Hours after opposition leader Juan Guaido called for a military uprising, hundreds of protesters took to the streets, and they were met with a heavy police presence. There were reports of shots fired, but it is still not clear if anyone has been injured from live gunfire. There are also reports that one of the government's military vehicles plowed into rows of protesters on the street, and one protester responded by setting the vehicle on fire. Now, Guaido was seen marching with the crowd hours after he posted a video online claiming it is time for citizens to take part in a military uprising to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro.
When the international community broadly supported our fight, we would be with the people of Venezuela. At this moment, we make a great call to public employees into a fundamental component not only for the transition, but for the reconstruction of Venezuela to recover national sovereignty.
In addition to armed soldiers, Guaido was joined by a former anti-government activist who was arrested in 2014. While he has been on house arrest since 2017, he told reporters that he is now free thanks to Venezuela's military. Protesters were seen throwing rocks at police, and the police responded by deploying tear gas. One journalist on the ground reported that tear gas was also fired towards Guaido, who was surrounded by around 70 young armed men dressed in military uniforms. Reports also noted that despite Guaido's calls for an uprising, there have been no other signs of military activity. Now, pro-government supporters were also present on the streets, and a group was seen gathering in front of the presidential palace to defend Maduro. The elected government was quick to dismiss the protest, and Venezuela's defense minister said the military, quote, rejects this coup movement that aims to fill the country with violence. Maduro also released a statement saying that he has spoken to all of Venezuela's senior military officers, and they assured him of their total loyalty. Now, the Venezuelan government has threatened Guaido with arrest, and legislators stripped his immunity earlier this month. So now it remains to be seen if the clashes will continue and whether the Maduro government will arrest the opposition leader, who has the full support of the U.S. and its allies. Scotty?
Okay, we're telling us what's going on down in Venezuela. I mean, we don't know yet if the U.S. is involved down there. But here at home, what is going on at the Venezuelan embassy here in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, so that's something we've been following because the State Department came out and they said that there was a deadline last week for the embassy to be turned over to supporters of opposition leader Juan Guaido. Now, there have been a group of people that have been living at the embassy for more than 2 weeks. And today, while they were still there at the embassy, a new group of protesters showed up, and they were there to support Guaido. Now, we saw some clashes between the two, but not anything too violent, and Secret Service have been present there for the last few days, and they were present there today, and they actually went as far as to set up barricades between the two groups. So this is something that we will continue to follow.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
For more, we bring in Daniel McAdams, Executive Director at the Ron Paul Institute. Dan, I know you're watching this, and we've talked about this over the last few weeks, but the movements today, is Guaido starting to kind of panic because things are not progressing as rapidly as he was expecting, hence this call for arms to violence and an actual military coup?
Well, I wonder how much in control he really is, or whether someone else is pulling the strings. I mean, the whole thing is rather farcical. First, you start with this very strange video seemingly recorded at dawn with a very tight shot just showing him and a couple of what looked to be military officers. There's a military base apparently in the background, unless it's a green screen or something, making it look like he now controls the base. The whole thing is very carefully scripted and as I say, slightly farcical, because after that, really nothing transpired. Nothing melded together. A couple of so-called military troops who turned to his side, who were arrested, said they were brought out by subterfuge. Their officers told them that they had to go out there. So the whole thing really has fizzled at this point.
Well, and a lot of this has to do with the United States and their involvement. I mean, you have Senator Marco Rubio down in Florida. I mean, he has been on a Twitter storm, basically trying to do everything he can to encourage people against Juan Guaido, or to encourage people to support him. There's been a lot of threats made by the U.S. leadership, yet Maduro is still in power. So are these empty threats, or is this kind of the support for this aggressive strategy with Venezuela that we saw a few weeks ago starting to decrease here on American soil?
Yeah, you could almost see Rubio drooling. His first tweets are time-stamped at like 3 in the morning. He's up furiously telling people, and talk about something unseemly for a U.S. senator, telling people to go to the streets in a foreign country and overthrow their government. You know, it's really unheard of. It's very ironic that a lot of these people, Rubio, the neocons, and even a lot of people in the Democrat side who were just recently, for the last 2.5 years, talking about how horrible the Russians are interfering in our elections, here they're openly not only interfering in the elections in a foreign country, but telling foreign people to rise up and overthrow their own government. It really just shows how arrogant these people are. I mean, it's just really incredible.
Well, okay, so let's just say Guaido is successful and he's able to actually overthrow the government. Have we seen any plans presented by Guaido or Guaido's team on how they're going to actually set up a democratic government, and more importantly, the elections that follow this? How are they going to hold these? Do we see any plans coming out of his organization, or the United States for that, on how they're going to guarantee a democracy in the future for Venezuelans?
Well, first of all, I don't see any chance. I think today was really the last nail in the coffin of Guaido. This was his big chance. This was his big stage appearance. And I think this is all over. I think perhaps the whole thing was staged are scripted for Guaido to get arrested. You know, he's a lot more value to the opposition in Venezuela now, arrested or even dead, because they need a casus belli to try to motivate people, to try to motivate the military, because it's very clear from the people in the streets and from the military not turning that, frankly, despite what John Bolton's fervent wishes are, Maduro, for better or for worse, is genuinely supported. So when the U.S. talks about we're going to support the people in Venezuela, well, what people are they talking about? The people who support their government don't count?
Well, so moving forward then, so let's just say it is squashed today, and you talk about Juan Guaido. First of all, where does he go from here? What can he do and not be seen as kind of a traitor to his country if Maduro is able to hold on to power? But more importantly, can the United States and the United States government actually get along with a government still under Maduro going forward? Because there are some major economic issues in the sanctions that the U.S. is putting on them that are causing a lot of this to occur.
This is where President Trump, you know, if he doesn't know what he's doing, he certainly allowed himself to be boxed in by the neocons. He should have known better. Now he is in a situation where he can't back down. The only thing he can't back down and have negotiations, as they should do, or urge the Venezuelans to work this out on their own. He's committed the U.S. to regime change in Venezuela, and his policy options now are few and far between. So it really is another neocon disaster that President Trump is facing, and he brought it on himself.
But that's the thing, Daniel. You and I both know President Trump is not going to admit a loss anywhere. So how does he get himself out of this situation? At the very least, how can he say, you know what, we tried, or some way the U.S. is winning? I find it very hard right now for the U.S. to find a way, with Maduro's power, to even say we helped in some positive way in this situation.
Well, can you imagine if you and I, Scotty, went down to the mall with a bunch of soldiers and said, we're going to overthrow the government, and we started firing? You know, we would face the wrath, rightly so, of our government. I think if Maduro is the legitimate president, or is the president of Venezuela, now he has an obligation to do something about a military coup staged on his soil. Maybe that's the whole idea. Maybe that's the whole idea of Bolton and his gang, is to provoke some reaction like this. Maduro simply can't ignore what happened today, as farcical as it was.
Well, it's going to be interesting once again to see how this plays out. But it'll be interesting to see if like as you predict, that this is actually Juan Guaido's last stand, and what happens to him next in his movement. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel.
Thanks, Scotty.
According to Reuters, Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Aricea Tuesday denied there was a military coup attempt underway to oust President Nicolas Maduro, and accused opposition leader Juan Guaido of operating under orders from Washington. Guaido called for a military uprising, and armed factions exchanged gunfire outside a Caracas airbase Tuesday. Aricea said Maduro, who's been in power since 2013, was in full control of the country with the backing of the military.
Waiting in a shelter in Mexico. Most here have travelled from Central America. For many, the next stop is to claim asylum in the US. But that path soon could become more difficult. US President Donald Trump has moved to toughen rules for asylum seekers, directing cabinet members to write up new policies that would include a fee for asylum applications. He also wants those who enter the country illegally barred from working until their claims are approved. The Texas border city of El Paso has struggled to cope with the migrant influx in recent months. The city's Republican mayor, Dee Margo, believes immigration law reform is long overdue.
The bottom line is, this is a problem derived from Washington and their inaction over the last 30 years to rationally deal with immigration reform. I hold both parties culpable, both sides of the aisle, as I say, and both houses of Congress are responsible for this humanitarian crisis.
Once migrants are processed and released into the US, many are sent to shelters like this one.
This is a brand new hospitality centre that has just opened in El Paso. This former warehouse can accommodate some 1,500 people. The previous facilities in the city were simply unable to cope.
In the meantime, work continues on sections of existing wall previously funded for upgrades. One will tower more than 9 meters high.
It's going to be definitely more difficult for people to breach it. It is going to slow people down, but what we have to do, hopefully, as a country, as an agency, as a government, is to basically close the legal loopholes that are a major draw for people to even come to the border in the first place.
At a shelter in San Diego, a new group of migrants arrive. If their cases aren't heard within 5 months, and the process now often takes years, they are allowed to apply for a work permit. President Trump wants to do away with that right and force judges to rule on all cases within 6 months. Norma Chavez-Peterson of the American Civil Liberties Union sees the administration's move as part of a continuing attack on migrants.
First the family separation, now this continued kind of attack and undermining of our asylum process, and really like it's almost like this gruesome wanting to torture or really make families suffer their experience as a way to deter, and we know that that's not very humane, and it's also the data shows families keep coming. So we really need to look at the root causes, and we should, as a country, we should be looking at how to address these issues in a much more humane way.
Trump has ordered officials to finalize a new policy proposal within 3 months, but it's unclear how long it might take for changes to take effect. Last month, US Customs and Border Protection officials encountered some 100,000 people at the US-Mexico border, the highest level in more than a decade. There is pressure on all sides to find lasting solutions to the surge at the southern border. Dan Williams, CGTN, El Paso.
The moment has come for Maduro to step aside.
Demonstrators take to the streets as Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido calls for the ouster of President Nicolas Maduro. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. Venezuelan authorities say they are putting down what they call a small coup attempt after opposition leader Juan Guaido announced his movement was in the final phase of ending President Nicolas Maduro's rule. In an early morning video, Guaido said he had military support, a claim disputed by Maduro. Protesters supporting both sides have gathered in Caracas, which is where we find our Stephen Gibbs. And Stephen, bring us up to date. What's the latest there?
Well, just in the last half an hour or so, we actually have been hearing some quite loud explosions here in Caracas, from eastern Caracas. We understand that's probably tear gas, which means that the protests that began early this morning are not over. The real focus was before dawn, really, when Juan Guaido, the rival president here, who declared himself president in January, he made his way to this military base in the center of Caracas. And although protests are pretty common here, this one was very unusual because Guaido was accompanied by a few dozen soldiers, rebel soldiers, who had defected from the Maduro side to the opposition side. Now, the aim, it seemed, of that protest was to try and possibly occupy that military base. Certainly both the rebel soldiers and many of the supporters of Guaido were calling on the people within that base to rebel too and join the opposition. That didn't happen. What we instead saw was volleys of tear gas coming from inside the base, some response from the armed pro-opposition soldiers there, and in the end something of a stalemate. Some pretty ugly scenes at one stage when a personnel carrier, or a riot control vehicle I probably should describe it as, appeared to drive over some of the protesters there. Now, also in a sign of the sort of chaos here, joining Juan Guaido there in that protest was Leopoldo Lopez. He is perhaps Venezuela's most well-known political prisoner. He's been in jail or house arrest since 2014. He managed to escape in the early hours of the morning. He says that therefore the people guarding him had also defected. He joined that protest. Since what's happened in the last few hours, more developments, including that that man, Leopoldo Lopez, he's now sought asylum within the Chilean embassy here in Caracas. So all sorts of developments. Meanwhile, the government here, as you say, describing this as a sort of pathetic, almost the words they use, a pathetic coup that didn't work. The Maduro government insisting that power very much remains in their hands, and this will be put down immediately, and that the opposition doesn't really have much chance in bringing about a regime change as it hopes to do.
Stephen, you've been covering this all day. Is there any sense of how long this uprising, or I guess it's a standoff right now, how long it could last?
It's very difficult to predict that. It does, on the ground here, I would say there are some signs that perhaps it's running out of steam. The early signs were that this was a big gambit on the part of the opposition. They're putting itself out on the streets with sort of rebel military. That's the sort of thing that you want to get this over with quickly. But no, we have that political prisoner who's now in asylum in the Chilean embassy. 25 of the rebel soldiers, we understand, have sought asylum in the Brazilian embassy. So it does seem to be faltering. But if you sort of take another point of view, and certainly the view we're hearing from the United States, was things were extremely close. U.S. Senior figures in the Trump administration suggesting even that President Maduro was at one stage in an aeroplane ready to leave this country and go to Cuba, and that several of his senior advisors, top people in the Maduro cabinet, have been negotiating a process of political change here. So a lot up in the air, but in terms of the immediate sort of protest and demonstration, things do seem to have lost a bit of steam in the last few hours.
Okay, Stephen, stay with us.
All right, all praise to the Most High Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Enough respect to you brothers teaching the truth all over the earth. I wanted to highlight and bring out an article here, and it's entitled Veterinarian Accused of Having Sex with More Than 300 Dogs. And a couple of brothers, as you can see, the original person that set up the link or sent the link to Google Plus was the brother, the head from the Dallas camp, Elder Yashawamba from GMS Sharmath, and also the brother ATL Mahar reposted it. So I had to go and find that article since it, the link didn't have the article, so I went and found it, and we're going to do a report on it. It's just more dirty wickedness from Esau, the so-called white man. And the title of this lesson is going to be entitled, Job Was Right About You Edomites, the Vine of Sodom. So let's just read it here, and then we'll filter it through the scriptures like we always do. This is intended to prove that Bible prophecy is correct and what it says, that the Bible is correct. And the prophet Job, who was not an Edomite, by the way, the prophet Job, the great Israelite, prophesied about you devils, man. And he spoke, he prophesied a lot about the wicked, which the wicked is the so-called white man Esau, but he also talked about some of your wickedness. And we'll prove it. So let's just read here. And I just wanted to highlight that the Bible is true what it says. It talks about you devils, man. How vile and filthy you people are. So let's read it here. It says, veterinarian accused of having sex with more than 300 dogs. And you see the damn devil right here on the cover, on the article. Look like a depraved. I mean, let's just read it and we just filter it through the scriptures and close the lesson out, man. This is getting fucking ridiculous. All right, a renowned veterinarian from Trenton in Missouri was arrested this morning after being filmed by a security camera while having sex with several dogs. See, according to the Trenton Police Department, an investigation was launched on Dr. James Thompson in January after several dog owners filed complaints about their dogs suffering from anal bleeding after visiting his clinic. And I want you to look at the face of this depraved criminal, okay? This fucking depraved, I don't know what to call the guy, the damn devil, man. Nothing more than an Edomite. A filthy, trashy Edomite. Continuing on, it says, during the investigation, the police convinced the owners of the West Trenton Animal Hospital, where Dr. Thompson practiced, to install several new security cameras around the building. The police and owners were completely shocked when they saw the video footage a few weeks later. Over a period of 2 weeks, Dr. Thompson was filmed sexually aggressing 19 different dogs, mostly smaller breeds like miniature poodles, bichons, and chihuahuas. Dude wanted to fuck the spokesman for Taco Bell, man. Dirty devil. TDP spokesman, Lieutenant Frank Simmons, I guess that's Trenton Police Department spokesman, Lieutenant Frank Simmons says the aggressions were rather violent and must have been traumatizing for the animals. Quote, he would put a cone-shaped collar around the animal's neck so he wouldn't get bit. Then he'd grab it and have sex with it in various positions. I guess doggy style was his favorite. According to Lieutenant Simmons, the veterinarian could have made a great number of victims. Quote, after interrogating the staff and customers, we collected evidence concerning at least 300 victims, but there could be thousands over his 17 years of practice, end quote. A total of 352 criminal charges have been filed against him, and the TDP says this number will probably double over the next few days. And I mean, it's just fucking ridiculous, man. That's a crying shame that you Edomites, man. You're not even, you people are not even fit to live in this world. You know, look at all the wickedness that you fucking do, man. This insane dog fucker right here. You know, and people get mad at us for the language we use, but I don't give a shit, man. You can fuck a dog, I can talk shit, I can use harsh language. Fuck you, okay? You're doing all kind of shit all over the earth. The Most High is going to remove you people out of power. You don't deserve to have any power in this earth. You're going back to your caveman state. And let's read about you damn devils, man, right now. Alright, so let's go to Job 30. And to prove that the Most High knew, and it's true what the scriptures say about you Edomites, man. Job 30 verse 1. But now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. And brothers bring this out a lot. And when we bring the scripture out and we break it down, we say, you know, Job didn't want you around his dogs because you would probably have sex with the dogs. People get mad when we bring that out. Now you see it right in your face, proof. You Edomites are filthy people, man. You're wicked, exceedingly wicked, and you don't have salvation, and the Most High is going to remove you off the earth. But now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. You see? And let's look up the word disdain and to show you something, because I looked this up a little while ago. Job said he wouldn't even have your forefathers to have sat around the dogs of his flock. And you see why. Disdain. It says to spurn, to abhor, disappear, cast away, contemn, despise, disdain, become loathsome, melt away, refuse, reject, reprobate, utterly vile person. Check this out. To reject, right here, it is most often used of God as rejecting a people or an individual, right? And you damn Edomites, you are rejected. Let's read that before we go any further. Hebrews 12 verse 16, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, you so-called white people, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. For ye know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected. That's why Job said he would have disdained to have you sit with the dogs of his flock, because you're rejected. He was rejected, for he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. You see? And you damn devils, as it shows right here, this man had sex with over 300 dogs. A damn filthy Edomite, just like it says in the scriptures right here. I'm going to read that again. Job 30. Let's go back to it. Job 30 and 1. But now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. And like I said, when we break that down, you devils get mad. When we say you would have sex with the dog, that's proven perfect. This man had sex with over 300 dogs. And they even got him on tape doing it. So verse 2. Yeah, whereto might the strength of their hands profit me, in whom old age was perished. For want and famine they were solitary. This is going into your history. It's telling you for want and famine you were solitary. You were the only people out there living in the wilderness like that. And we tell you about it. And you even know about it. The Guaido caveman, you know, you make fun of your own self. For want and famine they were solitary, fleeing in the wilderness, in former time desolate and waste. And what does it say in Malachi? It says, you will build up, but he's going to throw it down. For want and famine they were solitary, fleeing in the wilderness, in former time desolate and waste, who cut up mallows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat. They were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief. And that's what you are, a bunch of thieves, a bunch of dirty, rotten scoundrels, thieves, dog rapists, animal brothel havers. You people are wicked. They were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief, to dwell in the cliffs of the valleys, in the caves of the earth, and in the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they were gathered together. And this is you, living up in the caves and in the mountains. You know, it's all over the place. Geico Caveman, you know, Land of the Lost, you know, Captain Caveman. You portray yourselves very well because you know your history. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they were gathered together. They were children of fools, yeah, children of base men. They were viler than the earth, the most wickedest people that ever existed. And now I am their song, yeah, I am their byword, right? And now that we on this side of the earth, you act like you're the hunk of the whole planet. We your bywords now, but you're the people that really look like monkeys, that really behave like animals. You Edomites. And let's look at your further your history, because like we always say, you people are natural born freaks. You're natural born faggots and dirty individuals. This is Deuteronomy 32, verse 29. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. Talking about the Israelites. If they were wise, they would consider their latter end. Listen further. How should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them and the Lord had shut them up? Right, you devils couldn't do anything to us. We're more powerful than you. We're stronger than you. We're better than you in every way. We excel you in every way. But the only way you got a foothold over us is that the Most High put us in your hands. For their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. Right, your God is not like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You worship the God of self and mammon. You worship money and things, you know, all types of different gods. The gods of the Egyptians, the gods of all the nations or all the empires before now. That's why you're called spiritual Sodom, spiritual Egypt, Rome, Babylon the Great, you know, Nineveh, these other countries. All right, for their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is of the vine of Sodom and of the fields of Gomorrah. Right, your natural way of behavior for you so-called white people, you Edomites, you're like the people of Sodom. It says, for their vine is of the vine of Sodom and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall, their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons and the cruel venom of asps. Right, everything you do is poison. Your philosophies, that all you're about is poison. And let's go a little bit further. So it proves naturally that you people are like the ancient Sodomites and Gomorrites. Just like in the ancient Sodom and Gomorrah, these people want to have sex with the angels. Let's read real quick. Revelation 11 and 8. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. The dead bodies of the spiritual dead bodies of the Israelites, in a place known as Babylon the Great, but also spiritual Sodom and Egypt. Proving further that you people are the ancient Sodomites. Genesis 19 and 1. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them. And he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and they did eat. They did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of Sodom, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto them, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. So you see, these wicked ass people wanted to sleep with angels, just like Esau would want to sleep with the angels if he could, like he wants to have sex with all the wildlife. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him. And he said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do you to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. And let me just jump forward. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut to the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So in closing, these wicked ass people wanted to sleep with the angels, and the angels struck them with blindness. You want to hear the rest of the story, read it for yourself. Esau got to be taken off the earth. He's wicked, exceedingly wicked. The Most High is going to remove you devils out of power. Shalom.
Shalom. I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Wahara Kakwadash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. It's the brother Yahweh coming at you with another video to edify the hopeful elect. And Lord willing, that'll be edified to the hopeful elect. It's an article. I'm going to get right into it. Shalaki brothers, I'm going to get right into it. It's an article from RT News. Judgment, 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 judgment is coming to Babylon the Great. This is an article. I'm going to get right in it. It says 2 killed, 4 injured in University of North Carolina shooting on the last day of classes. This was on April the 30th, 2019. It says 2 people have been killed, at least 4 injured in a shooting at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Police reportedly have 1 male suspect in custody. Shots were fired near the Kennedy building on the UNCC campus on Tuesday afternoon. According to WFMY News, the campus is reportedly locked down. Officials have not released the identities of the suspect or the injuries. The school is issued an alert advising students to remain in a safe location. Emergency vehicles respond to the scene. 2 patients were dead on arrival and 2 more have life-threatening injuries out of the 6 victims taken to an area hospital, according to local media. I'm going to play the video.
These people just ran out. I don't know if it's from Atkins or somewhere else, but they just came out. I think they let them go. These people just ran out. I don't know if it's from Atkins or somewhere else, but they just came out.
Judgment, 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 judgment is coming to Babylon the Great. I'm going to leave brothers with a scripture, and apparatus ought to be edified. This is Amos 3 and 6. It says, shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Shall there be an evil in a city, and the Lord, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, have not done it? See, so who is evil? That's evil, you know. So the Lord brought evil upon those people, you know, at that university. You know, shall there be an evil in the city, and the Lord have not done it? You damn right the Lord did it. And He's gonna do more. He's gonna do more evil in the city, you know. And I'm gonna close out with that. I hope apparatus ought to be edified. I'm gonna give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Wahara Kakwadash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and shalom to the hopeful elect. Keep scribing, brothers. Keep pushing. We almost out of here. Shalom.